Welcome to the next Garden to Plate workshop. This one is on composting. I'm Chris Lampard. These workshops are funded by Food Bank and the City of Mandurah. So we have been talking about composting today. Why is composting important? Well, a lot of households produce food waste and composting is a good way of recycling food waste. Did you know, for example, that the world wastes 1/3 of produced food? If just 1/4 of that was turned into usable food, there would be nobody starving in the world. Interesting. And Australian households, 1/3 of a typical Australian wheelie bin is food waste. Tut, tut, tut. So, what can you do to reduce that food waste? Compost. So, there are a number of methods that you might use for composting. The simplest method, dig a hole in the garden, put your waste in it, cover it over, in a month's time it will be gone. Simple. Other methods include bokashi buckets. Here is my bokashi bucket. Smells good, don't believe it, it smells terrible. The lid fits nice and tight. You put a layer of food, layer of powder, layer of food, layer of powder, let it sit, it ferments, creates some really fabulous microbial activity. You can use the juice, diluted 1:10, which runs off the bottom from the tap here, in your garden as a feed, foliar feed or liquid feed into the garden. Absolutely fabulous. Strongly recommend bokashi buckets, ideal home composting system. Just keep your garden scraps, keep your kitchen scraps on the bench, into the bucket, away you go. Okay, so bokashi is one option. Another option which you can think about is worm farms. We're not talking about worm farms in any more detail today. There's going to be a separate workshop on worms. Worm farms are very good because they use reasonably large amounts of kitchen waste. They produce an extremely good soil, the sort of worm poo, the worm castings, and they also produce a liquid, the worm wee, which again can be diluted 1:10 and used as a feed in the garden. And for me, an ideal way to use food scraps is composting. So when it comes to composting, you've got a couple of options. You've got the large black bins which people use, or you can build compost heaps either in bays or just a heap in the garden. So what we've got here is a compost heap which we've built today, and you can see that this is built directly on the garden bed where it's going to be used. The reason I like to do that is all the nutrients will be working their way into the soil. Once it's finished, or once it's rotted down, it's going to be very easy for me to turn it in and mix it into the soil here. And ideally, I can use materials and plants which have finished their life and I want to compost. Rather than carrying them over to the compost heap, I can just use them here. So all the nutrients are working their way back into the ground. And it allows me to let this piece of the garden lie fallow for a little period of time while this is composting down. So how do you make a good compost heap? You need three main materials for a compost heap. Number one, you need brown material. That's things like cardboard, shredded paper, shredded newspaper, all very usable. Straw is very good. Sawdust can be used. Wood chips can be used, so anything which is brown. Personally, I like to use straw, leaf litter, and some twigs. So you can see in this compost heap here, we have, the layers aren't completely clear, but in here we have layers of brown, so you can see this is brown material here, straw, and there's a lot of leaf matter here which isn't so visible now. The second thing which you need for a compost heap is green material, that's your kitchen scraps. It's also things like weeds. I pulled this out of the pond, it's a weed out of the pond, and other green matter, so unwanted plants, hedge trimmings, grass cuttings, things like that. And then the last thing you need is poo. And so here is sheep poo which we use today. So the sheep poo I have put in a bucket and let it soak for a bit so it's not too dry, and so you can see it's nice and moist. And so those are the three main physical components you need in the compost heap. The other things you need are air and water. So how do you build a compost heap? Okay, the way you start is at the bottom, you put in a layer of brown. Then you put in a layer of green, then you put a thin layer of poo. Then a layer of brown, layer of green, thin layer of poo, so on and so forth, building it up into a pile like that. Then air. You want air into the compost heap. So you can see I'm using this this straw, and the reason I like this is it lets air pockets develop in there. If you don't have enough air in your compost heap, then your compost heap will go thick and slimy. You get a non-oxygen driven composting process which doesn't work at all well. You get slime and you will tend to get flies. So if your compost heap is slimy, add brown material like this, mix it in and get air in. Okay, then water. So dry compost heaps don't compost, they just sit. Soaking wet compost heaps don't compost properly. Again, it goes anaerobic and you get a slimy mess. The ideal is a compost heap where you give it a squeeze. This one's too dry, but you give it a squeeze and the water won't leak out of it. You just have enough water in there. So this is like a cloth which has been wetted and then wrung out. It's that sort of dampness. And so when I'm building this compost heap, I've got the hose on it. I'm adding water as I'm going along to make sure it gets to that right consistency. If it begins to dry out, I'll give it another water. So in about a week's time, I'll come down, check it. I might just run the hose over it to keep it nice and wet. And then the last thing you want to do is cover it over. I've got some banana leaves just to put on the top here. They'll rot down, but they also provide some protection. And bucket. The other thing I've got is this piece of carpet. The carpet sits over the top of it, helps retain moisture. As the compost heap begins to warm up, it will help keep the heat in. Nice hot composting, kills off seeds, leads to an accelerated composting process, and is excellent. So just going to leave this now. In about a month's time, I'll come back to it, turn it over, cover it again, let it sit. And within a couple of months, I'll have beautiful, nutrient-rich soil sat here exactly where I want it on the garden bed, spread it out, and I'll grow my veggies.